General Robert Heiser, to read it, go to the web and take a look at it, has a secret mission to Iran. Why he goes to Iran? Why does he go to Iran? He wants to feel the situation, first of all, and talk to the generals, big top generals of the Shah, 4-star, 3-star, whatever. Tell them that if you want to do the coup, don't do the coup. Because this is a popular revolution. We don't need civil war because we are going to be losers. The popular movement is going to win. That's their sense. They didn't say it, but one can read between the lines. And of course, one of the generals, I forgot the name after so many years, 4-star, who was talked to by Iranian generals, Heiser, said that we went general in the meeting and came back as soldier, foot soldier. That's his words. January 16, 1979, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, but after so many times, so many days or maybe months of picking up a telephone, calling the State Department, Washington, what can I do? Put yourself in his position. I apologize. He was a dictator. Anyway. They didn't tell him anything. He spent bullet. So, finally flees Iran. Then Bakhtiyar is in charge for 37 days. And January 27, 1979, Khomeini's secret letter to Washington is published. Recently published, at the time was secret. In other words, the person who did it, Mr. Yazdi or others, I said the name, by the way, I said I don't want to, but this is one of the persons. He died a couple of years ago, sent to Washington on behalf of Khomeini. And then February 1, 1979, Ruhollah Khomeini arrives in Mehrabad Airport, Tehran, the same airport that I departed 50 years ago, by the way, forever. November 4th, 1979, the US Embassy was taken over by a group of Islamists supported by the leader of counter-revolution. These are counter-revolutionaries. These are the different group of people. These are not popular types, and so on and so forth. Takeover of the embassy. There are objectives related to that. One of which is that, first of all, tell the Iranian people that we are anti-imperialists, quote unquote, anti-American. Pretending to be so. And then, of course, they are all anti-left. All these Islamists are anti-left. Their DNA is anti-left and liberal, if you will. So, and January 25th, 1980, by this time, Islamic counter-revolution crushed the revolutions of all kinds, liberals, half-liberal, social democrat, leftists, hard leftists, a little bit more soft leftists, harder leftists, Marxists, everybody, and established the Islamic Republic. Now, in the next slide, if you look at it, revolution and counter-revolution, 78, 1980. This is a very tumultuous time in Iran. 77, 79, as I said, popular movement, invoked and motivated by very many years of continuous repression, plus against the United States, 1953 coup. And of course, we have the impasse. Now here, we are talking about impasse, limited options on Iran by the United States. Genuine revolution in Iran is utterly undesirable. For who? For those who are puppeteering in Washington. Iran's popular and secular uprising must be somehow quelled and defeated. It is as if I was reading the agenda. It was not published. Obviously, we can read from the events, development of the events. The Shah's regime, heir of the CIA coup, is no longer supportable. Brzezinski, who died 2017, I guess, prevails in extending his Cold War thesis. U.S. support for the green kamarband of Islam. It's not belt, it's kamarband, as they say. It's a Persian word, by the way, came to the English language. Strategy and fine urgency. And then Guadeloupe and Heiser mission and letter of Khomeini, put it together. America takes sides again. One time, 1953, another time, 1979. Now, one can, okay. Next slide, the facts, pertinent facts. Takeover of the embassy in November 4th, 1979. Hostage crisis. November 14th, 1979, also sanctions. 10 days after that, Carter put sanctions on Iran. Billions of Iranian assets abroad were frozen. And then September 2nd, 1980, to August 1988, Iran-Iraq war. It is another cause, the creation of so-called fervor or so-called nationalist fervor, and have a role, Iran-Iraq. And then in mid-1980s, Iran-Contra affairs, which you have heard about. Arms sales to Iran proceeds to Contras in Nicaragua. Look, there is a Reagan time, actually. And then you have, from 1990s to 2015, varieties of sanctions of whatever reason, believable reason, real or fake, imposed on Iran. And July 14, 2015, was this JCPOA Iran deal. See how Iran deal fits with this timeline? And then May 8, 2018, Donald Trump's unilateral withdrawal from the JCPOA. And since then, abrogation of all the responsibilities, and then, of course, imposition of more sanctions. Iran's nuclear activity since 1982. Okay. 82, Iran planned to build a reactor at the Isfahan nuclear facility, which is a city in the central Iran. 83, IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, inspectors inspect Iran's nuclear facilities. Remember, it's after the revolutionary process. They inspect that. They say, okay. 84, Iran opens a nuclear research center in Isfahan, okay, based on NPT. 85, enriching uranium with assistance of Chinese, Pakistani experts, etc. And this is answer to your question of Chinese that you raised. In 1990, negotiations between Russia on reconstruction of Bushehr power plants, which is in the Persian Gulf area. Okay. 1993, Chinese, it's a Tokamak Fusion Center at Plasma Research Center will be cooperating with Iran. 1995, contracts with Russia to complete light water reactor in Bushehr for energy, the regular energy. 1996, 2011, a variety of political challenges on nuclear issues persists. And in 2012, during the Obama administration, Iran began enriching uranium at the Fordo facility near Qom. Remember the Fordo, which was part of the deal to dump on it, would eliminate the possibilities and so forth. 2015, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was signed. That's the significance of this plan already. Now, next one. I think I have about 10 minutes, right? 8 minutes? Okay, good. Now, my subtitle indicates Donald Trump, the emblem of America's descent. Not the cause, the reflection. So, in the third lecture, tomorrow, I'm going to explore that further. But here, why it is so, one has to look at the hidden causes beneath the facade of U.S. foreign policy. First of all, from the U.S. foreign policy. And the next point would be probably nature of power according to the post-war America, Pax Americana. In other words, the implosion or collapse of Pax Americana, which was a very powerful and hegemonic system of post-World War, in my judgment, collapsed in 1979. It's one of the ironies of history. 79, around saying, there's no cause, but I'm talking about this is almost ballpark figure. I couldn't say 80 because it was in 79, really, there. Contemporary globalization is the outcome of Pax Americana's collapse. Globalization is used interchangeably by the right and the left, including Marxist left, with neoliberalism. I like lots of colleagues who are on the left. I have so many of these colleagues who are on the Marxist side. They're friends of mine, if you will, but they're wrong. Globalization is a structure. Neoliberalism is a policy. So you want to really make a distinction of that. You cannot say era of neoliberalism, like a good friend of mine, Ben Fine of the University of London says for several years. You cannot build on a policy, an era. You can build an era on a structure. Like Pax Americana was a structure, which I'm going to be elaborating next time, tomorrow. So, contemporary globalization is the outcome of Pax Americana's collapse. In other words, you cannot talk about the collapse of Pax Americana unless you talk about what's the causal, internal cause, which we are going to be talking about. Pax Americana is a transient period, post-World War, up to 79, 80, whatever. Transient. It's a part of history. It's a very important part of history. But nevertheless, it's a part of history which is done. Balance of power and the polity and the Pax Americana is very important to be seen, which I'm going to be elaborating next lecture. And the balance of power changes fundamentally when that Pax Americana is imploding and it's gone. The breakdown, of course, breaks the balance of power. The end of history, as I said, what history? Fukuyama, as you know, had the end of history too soon. What history? This history. A friend of mine, good colleague of mine, Professor Anwar Sheikh, wrote in the margin of my recent book that Cyrus Bino put Fukuyama on his head on this. And lastly, hold up over the JCPOA by Donald Trump is but a symptom of American breakdown, system breakdown and American descent in terms of hegemony. Thank you very much.
Agradecemos la presentación del doctor Cyrus Vina. Ahora procedemos a los comentarios. Vamos a dar la palabra a la doctora Correa. Tiene 10 minutos para su comentario. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Gracias a todos ustedes por estar aquí hoy. Thank you very much, Professor Cyrus. I hope that you feel here in Mexico as a Mexican people.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes. I'm Mexican today, I said. If you allow me.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that he will carry Mexico in his head and his heart for a long time. I think so. Well, I think that your lecture this morning was very controversial here in Mexico, because we are working a lot of what is happening with the new power distribution around the world, especially what is happening with China and India in the last 10 years or so. At least, of course, if you work with the World Bank data, you can find different situation about the expansion of China in the world economy. But it is true that we cannot believe too much in the World Bank data. It is true, but also with the Trump policies, I know it is not exactly policies that we can talk about. It is just maybe just an ideas that he tried to put on his foot, but he don't explain very much all the strategy that he is following. But it is also true that the markets in the United States are reacting about what is happening with this government. And also, we can find a lot of forces in the market, especially in the financial markets, that support this kind of adventure that Trump is invite to all the people around and all the world around. I think that you try to explain very well this morning that the hegemony that it is the point of the United States right now, and many of these reactions is a very controversial. It's a very contradictory inside the United States, because at the same time that they need to give us all the support to the financial markets, and they need to give a lot of support to the firms outside the United States, and especially the military industry, and of course the arms race that we are living right now. And then in this arms race, I think that it is happening a lot of changes right now. A lot of changes, and one of these changes is, of course, the technology. The technology that you start to explain what is happening in this arms race with the technology and the changes in all the industry. I think that we need to follow more deeply and what is happening there, especially because it could be not only nuclear. At this moment, the arms race is taking a lot of different way of, let's say, the biochemical arms, or I don't know, another kind of arms, that it is growing a lot because not only the efficiency that they have, but also the cost they are not too expensive, like to have this a huge what do you say, a huge almacén, a huge stock of arms that you need to have. And then there are some countries that in this right now that have a very depreciated stock, arms stock at this moment. And United States is looking like, in a way, the Trump policies is permitting to renew this stock arms and put the United States in another place of this arms race. I think that it could be interesting if I know that you are an expert, and I think that it could be very interesting if you try to say more about that.
Muy bien, doctora Correa. Gracias. Ahora le damos la palabra al doctor Roberto Zepeda para su comentario.
Many thanks, Claudia. Muchas gracias. Gracias por la invitación para participar en esta importante conferencia del doctor Cyrus Vina. ¿Sí? Welcome, Dr. Cyrus. It's a pleasure to have you here in UNAM, in the Center for Research on North America. And I would like to say several points, but before I would like to say that it was a very complete presentation, and it helps us to understand the U.S.-Iranian relation, especially during the second half of the 20th century and in the last years of the 21st century. And I agree with many of the things you mentioned. I mean, just let me ask you some questions, and what do you think about? Do you think if there is a really, considering the U.S. foreign policy and also for international students, we classify the foreign policy of every president as a doctrine. Do you think there is a Trump's doctrine? For example, if we compare these foreign policies with Obama, and then as we have mentioned, as you have mentioned, there was more like an international relation, more a liberal policies trying to finish this problem with between the U.S. and Iran, and trying to create this joint agreement in which there was a nuclear pact, right, in order for Iran to reduce the uranium enrichment, and this was part of the agreement to reduce the nuclear power through the uranium enrichment, and then apparently it was working, considering what other European countries which were members of this agreement. And there was, I mean, for example, the French president didn't agree with Trump about withdrawing from this pact, right? So do you think what is the reason behind the U.S. decision to abandon this pact? And because France, for example, suggested Trump to remain, and then other European countries, the majority of them, also the European Union, was suggesting to stay to remain in the United States in this agreement. Is there a possibility, considering all the above mentioned, is there a possibility to reach a new agreement with the United States during the Trump administration, especially because Trump, one of the negotiating tactics or the strategy is to threat before and then to reach an agreement, right? Apparently, well, this is also happening with China. It's also in more commercial, there's a different relation, more trading relations. Also with Mexico, we also faces this U.S. threatened Mexico to impose tariffs on our exports, on Mexico's export to U.S. in order to have Mexico more cooperation, its migration and terms and all. So what is the intention of what are the well, if there is all of these policies of the United States, what is behind all of these policies, right? Oh, sorry, I haven't finished. Yeah, sorry. How do you define the new balance of power in the world, and then considering there's a decline of the U.S. hegemony in the world? Do you agree? I mean, we have mentioned there is this debate of globalization. Do you think, well, is this the end of globalization? What are the prospects? Are we facing more constraints of international trade? And then there was an article in The Economist at the beginning of this year. They talk about globalization, right? So I mean, considering all of these trade wars between the United States and China, but also the role of the United States in the international system, in the international arena, is declining. And what are the emerging powers? What are the new centers of power in the world? And what is the role of Iran in all of this? And then considering that most of the prospects, they say they consider different centers of powers between, well, now it's China, Russia, and what is your opinion about the United States? Do you identify other powers, or other world powers? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Well, let me start with Professor Correa's eloquent comments and questions and concerns, actually, which part of it is my concern too, as a fellow of Economists for Peace and Security, very much the armament, increasing armaments and dangers and so forth, nuclear and otherwise. It's very, very important for us to think about it. So therefore, there is no question that there is, if not the new era, but there is a tendency for arms race, which the United States has started that. There's no question about it. And look at the percentage of expenditures on the arms and on the so-called national defense, War Department, I'll call it, relative to other nations. I mean, there's no comparison. The United States, half of the rest of the countries behind the United States, if you put them together, is not even equal to the United States. So that's pretty dangerous. We are very close to midnight, as they say. Some of the scientists talked about, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes to midnight. It's a sad, sad story. I share that. As for technology, let me have two things about technology. I spent so much on theorizing technology and skill formation and so forth. Let me say two things. In a general sense, technology, when you look at it and read the papers, technology comes from the mind of people who are just looking at it as a Western thing now, and particularly in the United States, okay? Because they already started that, okay? All right? Okay? They're guilty as charged, as they say. But not anymore. China, look at China's technology, information system, and so on and so forth. Look at others. Look at Iran. Tell you an example. With this government, which is repressive, and I don't like it, and they don't like me, the graduates of one of the technical universities in Tehran, bachelor's degree, applied to Stanford several years ago for PhD, electronics, all this technical stuff. And the first 15 were Iranians from that university. The 16th person was from MIT. Think about it. I'm not saying that this government is good and so on, of course repressive and everything else, but developments has its own way. And technology is not the monopoly of the West anymore. This is one. And technology in such a way, of course, is in every field, including information system and so on and so forth, intertwined and so on and so forth. The part that would have something to do with the arms race is disheartening, of course. This is the part. But on the other side of it, it has multi-purpose and so on, so that technology is extremely important, and it's not belong to the West anymore, so-called West. I don't know what West is. I used to teach a long time ago for one semester the so-called Western civilization. I said, this word is not a good connotation. I'm not going to teach this. There is a world civilization, and there is this side and that side of it. So now globalization is creating equal footing, perhaps, you know, so-called God bless globalization in that sense. So anyway, so going back, I share your concerns, absolutely. And of course, the position of Trump administration and military, hang up on military and so forth is also very much concern, should be concern for all of us, including my colleagues in Economists for Peace and Security and many other groups who are really trying to eliminate the possibilities of war and so on and so forth. Now, thank you, Dr. ZEPEDA. I think you raised very many good questions here. First, about doctrine of Trump. This is anybody's guess, actually. My take on it is doctrine of bull in the China shop doctrine, or chaos. That is my take on it. And if you're in the field, if somebody claimed for that, please tell them that Cyrus Spino said first, okay? Put it on a footnote. Okay. In terms of the trade and balance of power that you were talking about, I'm just summarizing it very quickly. You're excellently aware that and acutely as well, that we are in the transition. So transition and balance of power would be one issue to talk about. In other words, tit for tat and so on and so forth. And that's why we have a problem. And GCPOA, for instance, for the time being. Or we have problems with trade issues with China, trade issues with European Union. We don't have any problems. Trump has a problem. Anyway, I beg your pardon. So we have all kinds of issues on our hands. But there is one thing to speak of transition and balance of power, and another thing to talk about that where the balance of power is going. There are two things from the transition. Mostly when I speak in terms of when the balance of power, when I say changed, is going. Although in the short run, it is very important. But the reaction of Trump administration, for instance, against such issues as trade, as Iran deal, and every other elements that you can put your fingers on, would show the reaction. They are not in charge. For instance, for North American trade agreement, whether we like it or not, original one, whether we like it or not, Clinton administration. What did change? Nothing much with Trump. Just few things here, few things there. He wants to change the name. As I said last time, he's a mommy's boy. He wants to be there, something like that. So, nothing. The name of GCPOA becomes whatever. He would accept it, perhaps. He just worked or thought or said from the seat of his pants. There's no rhyme and reason, based on my first lecture argument, and so on and so forth. So in that sense. The distinction is very important to look at the balance of power has changed. But balance of power in the transition, how it is changing, how would you show that this change is taking place? The reaction to it would be very important on the part of the United States or other nations as well. In other words, the United States is not in charge when they talk about trade with China, tariffs on EU, or abrogation of GCPOA. They are not in charge. Somebody in charge, this polity, if you will, this polity in transition does not belong to the United States. If this is the polity of the United States, would take care of it. Even mafia would not fight in their own neighborhoods. They don't kill each other. I know for a fact because I was between Rhode Island and Boston, going back and forth to Harvard. I know some of these families would not kill each other, in that places, in Rhode Island, when most of them were, located and so on and so forth. Now, New York, maybe a few bodies, and Boston, a few bodies, things like that. Just an analogy. So, and also the question on Iran, the balance of power. You read something. Iran is getting more powerful, even though Iran is a weak country, if you will. Put it in whatever quotation you want. We know what things are at stake. It's not a big country. But the question is, when Iraq of Saddam Hussein is not there, Iran is more powerful, isn't it? When Afghanistan is in shambles, Iran is powerful. So, thanks to the United States, thanks to Bush administration, if you will, the idiots that started the Iraq war and invasions. These idiots. So that's another thing. So I don't know whether I'm missing anything, but let me check to see If I miss, please raise that. I'll answer that. Thank you.
Muy bien, ahora vamos a pasar a una ronda de preguntas. Si pueden hacer su pregunta en inglés sería mejor, pero bueno, vamos a hacer una primera ronda de preguntas. En el público, ¿alguien tiene alguna pregunta para el doctor Vina?
Hola, buenas tardes. Hello, Professor Vina. Thank you for coming here and welcome to Mexico. My question is actually, I don't know if it is suitable to make it to you because it's more regarding to North Korea, like relation U.S., North Korea, and South Korea. Like actually, when just Trump came to the administration, he started to make new negotiations with the North Korea, but the reaction of South Korea was actually faster than what he can imagine. So the South approached directly the North, and it was a movement that maybe states was not expecting that the South will be able to move without their permission. So from my perspective, I think this was the other sign of the position of states in the world. But for me, what is actually maybe the concern for me is states has never respected the peace in the other places, right? So which are the risks for these regions? Like, for example, South Korea, it's very vulnerable for the whatever reaction of states. So in this scenario, however, it is pointing out the weakness or the dissent of the states as the, how can I say, the representing of the global or the world power. There is regions like, in this case, South Korea or even Mexico, that we are more vulnerable for the reactions of states. So what will regulate the, or what will assure the stability for these regions in case there is a bigger problem? Thank you.
Answer, please. Another question, por favor.
Thank you for the presentation, Professor. Very informative. I would just like to know, what are your opinions on the whole tension in the Strait of Hormuz, I think it's called, and the supposed bombings of the oil fields in Saudi Arabia that has been, the Houthi rebels have said they've done it, but the Trump administration is saying it's Iran. It seems very incoherent.
Una última pregunta de esta ronda. ¿No? Bueno, le damos la palabra, please.
Thank you very much. I think your question is very complex, as you probably realize, and it cannot be covered in a few minutes or so. I'm trying to point to a few things which may be useful. First of all, I think the trip that Trump did to Korea for that things should be welcome. You call it idiot or anything like that, yes, so be it. But speaking to the so-called enemy is very important. That is clearly important, and which we didn't see from Clinton administration or any other administrations and so forth, and then stiffing right there and say, this is America, give me a break. So that's very important, first one. Second is that the armistice in Korea was signed, but no peace agreement. People forget. No peace agreement. They have to sign, the United States got to sign peace agreement without any other obligations, reciprocity with Korea. The first thing. Every other major participant in the Korean War got out, except the United States. It's about 28,000 soldiers and all kinds of things in there. Give me a break. You have to get out. So, and signing the peace. That's the thing. Second thing is that I think there has been, watching the news and everything else surrounding it, I think both South Korea and North Korea are one part of Korea. We have to consider that. And one should not be worried about the old Cold War, afraid of communism, quote unquote communism, things like that. What communism? Soviets were not communist anyway. So, in that sense, I think these are propaganda. And in that sense, I think the president of South Korea has done a good job. We have to give him credit for that. But then, of course, the so-called deal with North Korea did not come to pass. Bolton was against it. As you know, he was kicked out a few weeks back. And many others were not. So why should North Korea comply? That's the case. And North Korea is a nuclear power. My take on it is that recognize that North Korea is a nuclear power, then negotiate, and they say yes. I can guarantee that if you do it. They want the prestige. They were made like a parking lot. If you go back to the pictures of the Korean War, you don't recognize the place. It's a surface of moon. And the Americans did it. That's how God did it. I'm ashamed to be an American at this time because of that. So that's my 2 cents on that. And you were raising a very important question in the Strait of Hormuz. I think the cause of all these havoc is the abrogation of JCPOA by Trump unilaterally. And on the top of it, having more sanctions on Iran and so forth. This is an insult on the injury, regardless of whether the government is good or not in Iran, regardless of everything. Okay. I think Saudi Arabia is very key, and United Arab Emirates, which their size is very close to my handkerchief right here as a country. I say that because I have a reason to say that later. I'll tell you about it. That they're sending all those torturers to Yemen, Yemenis, United Arab Emirates. They're in charge of torture in Yemen for 3 years, 3.5 years. And then, of course, they have differences now with Saudi Arabia and so on. And then pounding the Yemenis. Houthis were about 40% of the population, 35 to 40. For 30 years, 35 years, they really did not have anything under those two dictators, Hadi and others, which they fled to Saudi Arabia. And by the way, any dictator from Africa and those places who is kicked out goes to Saudi Arabia, like Idi Amin goes to Saudi Arabia. So that's kind of state that we are confronting with the Saudi Arabia. A kind of state which is based on individuals are deciding, like this Prince, what's his name, MBS, or BS perhaps, that's much better, who is also the murderer of Khashoggi, the person who almost 10, 15 years helped his family, propagandized with them, was a nice guy with them, and so forth, and so on. And killing that person, murdering it in somebody else's embassy, namely Turkey. Give me a break. And of course, pounding the Yemenis because they want to have independence. They don't want to have their own country altogether. Yemen is one of the oldest countries in the whole world, 4,000 years or maybe more. they had in the 70s that South Yemen, North Yemen, socialism, and during the Shah of Iran, Shah was on behalf of the United States sent contingent, I remember that at the time, contingent of fighters to fight the South, fight the socialists on behalf of the United States, gendarme of the area. They call it Dhofar, the part of Yemen, which was radical. So in that sense, Saudi Arabia, which is just made up after World War II, breaking up after World War I, breaking up Ottoman Empire by a bunch of Wahhabis, Sunnis, who are not even recognized by main Sunni sects, let alone Shiites altogether, run. And they are also, they have 15 of the 19 hijackers from Saudis are responsible for 9/11 in the United States. So think about that. And of course, Iran is very close to Houthis. They do not really send the stuff, but they are connected. Houthis might have been exercised that with some other elements inside Saudi Arabia. Just an interview with one of the radios in Washington. I said that eastern part of Saudi Arabia is oil fields and everything else. And that part is a Shiite. They like Iran. So that inside job, without inside job, it would have been impossible to do so. Iran may or may not, but there is no evidence. And there is also no evidence of tampering with those tankers and so forth and so on. This is done perhaps in a clumsy way by Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. That's my take.
Muy bien, si no hay alguna otra pregunta, vamos a dar por terminado a esta mesa. Agradecemos la presencia del Dr. Cyrus Vina en el CISAN. Y we are very grateful to having you here at UNAM, at CISAN, and in Mexico. You are welcome. Anytime you want to come back, you are very welcome here at CISAN. También agradecemos la presencia de la doctora Eugenia Correa y del doctor Roberto ZEPEDA. Muchísimas gracias. Quedamos clausuradas la sesión de hoy. Mañana continuamos a las 10 de la mañana, pero en el Instituto de Investigaciones Económicas. Es la tercera y última sesión del Dr. Cyrus Vina.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Let me thank the audience as well, and thank you, and thank the colleagues here who suffered through my talk, of course, made excellent comments on the issues. And thank you very much.
Thank you.